today I'm very pleased to introduce you to Raymond Schkolne. He's going to talk about risk and retirement strategies for healthcare practitioners and their staff. Thank you.
So, good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you very much for the opportunity, both to Joey, who organized the conference, to Peter for your introduction. It follows straight on from the previous presentation. I think Jubei did really well and gave some important messages. And what I'm really homing in on over here is what I've called the risk and retirement blind spot. And this blind spot is, if I may put it that way, an epidemic or resulting in an epidemic in South Africa. The vast majority of people in South Africa arrive at the point of retirement and do not have sufficient funds to look after themselves. I'm not talking about the people that haven't earned a salary their entire working life. I'm talking about people that earn a salary their entire working lives, arrive at the point of retirement, and there isn't anything. And specifically also, this occurs in medical practices. And the other point, of course, is if, God forbid, one becomes disabled, one isn't able to work anymore, people aren't covered in many situations. Now, if you're studying medicine, you are focused on medicine. And pharmacology, you're focused on pharmacology. And it's not only the case in the medical arena. It's in engineering. It's in fact even in chartered accounting. It's with lawyers. It's with teachers. It's with people in most professions. The focus when you're studying is on becoming a doctor if you're studying medicine. And there's a powerful and important message: intensity and focus. Focus on what you're going to try and achieve. And what happens is one starts working and one's focusing on on one's work. And one then kind of becomes head of a practice, and you focus on all the pressures, and there are huge amounts of pressures. I certainly don't mean to diminish them in any kind of way, but the point is that important issues, in fact critical issues, like your risk and retirement cover, often get pushed to the wayside. You forget about it, it's on the periphery, and it becomes a blind spot. So that's what I'm addressing this morning. So as Peter introduced, Bev May and I are involved in an initiative called Stonebridge Group Benefits. And the metaphor is a bridge. It was very interesting walking around this hall during the morning and speaking to some of the exhibitors. The point is that most firms, and there are a number of them over here, that have been in business for a long time, they've been relatively successful, they are established, they have risk and retirement funding for their employees in place. And many of the stands over here, the exhibitors, are relatively younger, and they start up and they don't have it in place. And so there's this point about moving from here to there. There's a point about transition. What Bev and I specifically focus on is what's called institutional funding. It's basically if one is a medical firm, or if one is a business, or if one is an organization, the question to what extent that firm provides an institutional fund for their employees. And I'll get into that more during the course of this presentation. But it's critical also if one's just a one man or one woman or one person firm. And it's also critical if one only has one employee, a personal assistant. And I'll come to some examples related to that as well. And so what the bridge metaphor is it's the metaphor of going from here to there, of transitioning. That transition, under all circumstances, just about all circumstances, is going to be painful. I put it to you that it's more painful to not do that now, or to not do that in the near future. The longer one waits, the more painful it becomes. So firstly, what is risk funding and what is retirement funding? Risk funding really relates to if one becomes disabled, that's a calamity, and there's a double calamity if one isn't covered. It relates to cover in the event that one becomes disabled, you get paid out a lump sum of money that enables you to look after yourself, or you get paid what's called income replacement. Every month an amount gets paid to you in place of a salary because you're no longer able to work. It applies also to dread disease cover. You know, they're the 5 big dread diseases, which you as doctors would know much better than I do. But in the event that one contracts a dread disease, risk cover should cover for that also, in the event that you've got that specific category of insurance. And of course, if one passes away, what about one's partner? What about one's children? So the enabling of the beneficiaries to live with dignity in the event that one passes away. Retirement funding relates to the point of retirement, and that you put aside an amount every month so that at the point of retirement you have enough to look after yourself in all the years that one is retired. Just a little anecdote, and I promise you this is a true story. I've been decluttering, and I found a letter. People used to write letters like many years ago. I found a letter from a friend who had qualified as a doctor and was doing his housemanship. And he wrote to me about all the trials and tribulations of doing his housemanship. I sent him the letter from a number of years ago, and he said to me, you know, Raymond, I am retiring this year. So the time has gone like this. You think you're young, you think it's not necessary, you retire very soon. And the real important point is how we focus on that. So retirement funding means an amount, typically if you're in an organization, that gets taken off your salary every month before you get it. You don't even know that it's gone, but it's going every month. Now, when I moved around this morning, I just want to repeat, some companies have it. Other companies I spoke to don't have it. A couple of them said, you know, in my previous company I had it. I don't have it in my current company. I'm very uncomfortable. Won't you speak to the chief executive about it? That's what happened in this hall this morning. I don't know what each of your specific situations are, but you know, these are examples that are happening inside this room. So both risk funding and retirement funding, I suggest, are essential. And you know, as I said, one should focus, if one's a firm, on the institutional side, but one can always supplement it, one should always supplement it on the individual side, because it's never going to be enough, even if one's company is putting it aside for you. So what's the big deal? Well, firstly, it's a big deal because if the company is putting money aside, there's a huge amount of money involved. It's got to be properly managed, it's got to be properly looked after. In the event that the firm doesn't have it, we propose you need to have it. In the event that the firm does have it, what we've experienced and seen in many of these firms and organizations is that they haven't looked at it for some years. And if you don't fix some very easy things to fix, it becomes, if I can call it, a calamity or a disaster. If your beneficiary form isn't completed properly and you pass away, and your current dependents aren't on it, and you're on an unapproved fund, it's going to be very problematic for the beneficiaries. So relatively small contributions towards a big amount in the future. And it's not being melodramatic, the point about retaining dignity. Just imagine having worked your whole your whole career, you arrive at a point of retirement and there isn't enough. So what I'm saying is, essentially, if one thinks about medicine, it's really the caring profession. And just the thought of the suggestion that the caring applies to one's patients, and the caring applies more broadly also to oneself, very importantly, and to one's employees. It's a message that we care for our employees. In the stands moving around here, people said, if my employer did this, I would value it tremendously. The experience of being cared for. And I heard Joubert say earlier that, you know, one of the factors that enable or kind of cause employees to stay with companies for longer time periods is if this kind of arrangement is in place. So it enforces a discipline of delayed gratification. I'm under no illusion that people are under huge financial stress, and it's very difficult to put money aside for the future when one's got huge debt implications currently. It's nothing to be laughed at. It's a very serious thing, and one needs to acknowledge that. The point is that if one kind of alleviates all the pain now and doesn't think about the future, the pain at that point in time almost certainly is going to be greater than what the pain is today. And I heard also Joubert talk about the millionaire beggar. So there are many doctors, engineers that have, good salaries, but aren't focused on this issue and are spending the money now, and that's the trap that I'm strongly proposing to you to avoid, to think beyond today. You might be aware of the marshmallow test. Can I just get a sense, anyone aware of the marshmallow test? The marshmallow test, it was a test done a good number of decades ago where children were given a marshmallow. And they were told that if you can hold back, not eat this marshmallow for 15 minutes, then you'll get 2 marshmallows after 15 minutes. And some children weren't able to, and they ate the marshmallow, and others didn't eat the marshmallow, and they got 2 marshmallows later. There's been tests, research done on this since then, which demonstrates that the people, the little children, who could delay gratification later in life were on balance more successful than the ones that couldn't delay gratification. Delaying gratification is a very important capability and is an indicator, in fact, of success. And I'm just also saying that I think this relates to risk and retirement funding. So there are quite a lot of legislative changes coming through. You're welcome to ask me about them afterwards. There's a 2-pot system coming in on the 1st of September of this year, which is a huge change in the risk and retirement fund industry. The painful consequences of out-of-date details. I've spoken about beneficiary forms not being up to date. Very often, people are above the risk-free limit. They have to have a medical in order for their insurance to increase, and they don't do it on a regular basis. That's very problematic. People are become older, and the age of when they're going to stop paying the risk cover is about to be there, and they don't know about it. Huge amounts invested. It requires proper management. There are a lot of simplification opportunities already if you have it in place, and the discipline of annual communication to employees. I want to tell you a story about a real thing that I experienced. We were involved in an organization. There's a woman in the organization that contracted cancer, and she went for treatments, and she didn't know that she was covered. She was covered. The company had covered her. There hadn't been communication to employees. There wasn't an awareness. And I'm proposing to you, whether you have this in place or not, if you've got even one employee, and if you even haven't got an employee, you need to talk to yourself. The grappling with the issue. What is my firm going to do? I must think through, if I don't have anything in place, if someone in my firm, my personal assistant, becomes disabled tomorrow, what am I going to do? I mean, legally, I suppose, if you don't have it in place, the person had a salary every month, you part ways, that's it. The person isn't able to work. But how good are you going to feel about that? I've come across a number of medical firms where a personal assistant arrives at the point of retirement and says to the head of the firm, I can't retire, I don't have anything, I need to carry on working. The person isn't that good at working anymore, but there's nothing. What does the head of the firm do? These are the kind of difficult issues to consider and grapple with as a medical firm. Now, the annual rates and fee reviews, anybody been involved in this process in institutional funds, every year there's a report that the business or the organization gets. It's called a review of annual rate and fee review, and that is the springboard for asking a lot of these questions. I've covered very briefly the 2-pot system. A third can go into what's called there's a third that you can draw from, and there's 2/3 that will become vested and that you aren't allowed to draw from. from the 1st of September onwards. I can cover that with you if there are questions. So firms don't offer risk and retirement funding. Medical firms don't offer it very often, and others also don't. Why not? Well, as I've covered with you, there's a focus on the medical part of it and not on peripheral issues. Very often people aren't aware of the imperative. You know, it's expensive. It is very expensive. And that's, again, I asked some people moving around here, why don't you give it to your employees? And the answer to me was, it's too expensive. We can't afford it. And I can relate to that. I can understand that. The firm needs to bring in income. There are huge amounts of expenses every month. We've got to cover them. This is something that isn't going to alleviate my pain today. The point is, it's going to alleviate pain over the long term, and people don't take it out because there's no current pain felt. When the pain hits, it's usually too late, unfortunately. There's complexity involved, there's tax, there's governance, there are legal issues. We want to get to the simplicity beyond the complexity. There's a wariness of financial advisors. You know, people say, but can these people be trusted? We've read things in the newspaper and so forth. And there's an overall lump sum remuneration philosophy. I come across that a lot in the industry today, especially with startups where there are younger people involved. The younger people say, give me my money, I'm independent, I'm an adult, I know what to do with it. And I know how to invest my money, and they see themselves as experts, and very often wake up again when it's too late. I was in a company called Old Mutual. I was the head of remuneration and benefits there for 10 years during the 1990s. And there was a move at that time from what was called defined benefit. I don't know if people still remember that kind of arrangement, to what's called defined contribution. And people were given a choice. If you're in defined contribution, you exercise independent choice. You have your hand on the steering wheel and you can drive it. Just about everybody went for that. The people that stayed with defined benefit were the actuaries. They were the only ones. They knew what the figures were. They knew how to. They stayed there. So the point is, and you know, if you ask me what is my value system, I would say very important to be independent. But I would be a little bit paternalistic, if I can put it that way, on this issue. People don't easily take pain today in order to alleviate pain tomorrow. Very often, the organization is doing individuals a huge favor. Talking about improving their lives significantly and the lives of their beneficiaries. If you put aside funds every month for them, for their retirement. Just by the way, if I'm talking about amounts and you don't have it yet, the amount would be usually for a starting thing about 8.5% of salary, 6% of which would go to retirement funding, 2% to risk funding, and about 0.5% to expenses. That's the way it would typically work if one's relative. That's not enough, but I can tell you 8.5% for someone who isn't giving it now. Firstly, it's very expensive, and secondly, it is a huge amount more than nothing at all. So, just in terms of the way forward, you know, one has to consider the firm's current situation. If you have it already, then in almost all cases, there are significant opportunities to help employees by tightening the current arrangements. If you don't have it, then there needs to be a discussion where one works through what are the issues and how do I move towards a transition. If not this year, then next year. But starting to think about it and starting to plan for it. And every firm is different. Every organization is different, so there will be distinct features for different firms. And the employee numbers do in fact determine the possibilities. If you're by yourself, if you have only one employee, I'm saying to you, do something, still do something. If you've got 5 employees, you can start going for what's called institutional arrangements or arrangements on a firm-wide basis, and more formal arrangements, in other words, become possible from 5 employees and above. Consider the oxygen mask. The point there, and Jubei referred to it as well, the first person to look after is yourself. You can build things into service contracts. For example, we require, if you're employed by us, that you put aside 3% of your salary every month towards retire, and we will match it. So you can do that matching. You can start with risk funding if you want to and not retirement, or start with retirement and not risk funding. And the education, which I've covered, is very important. I'm saying find a trustworthy financial advisor or employee benefits broker. Those people, someone that you can trust, that can advise you. Those people have expertise and they know what, and they would be able to assist you. And be very, very careful of the force of inertia. You know about the boiled frog, where the frog is jumps into boiling water, jumps out immediately. It gets a shock. But if the frog goes into coldish water and you switch up the temperature slowly, the frog gets boiled alive. So beware of inertia. It's a very strong force. And so just in conclusion, I'm saying to you, one small first step, whatever it is, do something. Engage somebody, start thinking about it, take a step now, and try very hard, despite all the pressures, to focus also on this issue. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm very happy to take questions.
So Raymond, you mentioned the cost, say 8.5% of payroll, but also to say, can you just explain how that's ameliorated by tax deduction?
Okay, so I don't know if people heard that. If one's paying 8.5%, the thing is that if one received that in one's income, one would be taxed on it. If it goes straight to the retirement fund, firstly, the employer gets that as an expense, so the employer doesn't pay tax on that. That's point number one. Secondly, the member, the person who's benefiting from that, it doesn't get taxed while it's in the fund, and so you have all the benefits of capital gains tax not being charged and any other kind of tax while it's in the fund not being charged. Does that answer it, Bev? Thank you very much. Anything else from anybody?
Raymond, for a wonderful talk, a little token of appreciation for you.
Thank you very much.